So we go on to agenda item 1, apologies for absence and declaration of substitute members.
There's a full complement, so there's no apologies or absences at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, disclosure of interest. To deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interest as interests other than pecuniary interests, as defined under the C4 Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. Councillor Lord.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've not got any peculiar interest, but I'm declaring interest in the fact that one of the properties you are discussing, I have sold it. I have no interest in it, but I have sold it. But I thought to declare it rather than there be any confusion whatsoever.
Yeah. Do you know the applicant then, Councillor Lord?
I don't know him at all. I have met him once at the solicitor's office.
Right.
I don't know him. I know his name, but I don't know him. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
He's not a friend. He's not a colleague. I've met him once in the solicitor's office when we exchanged contracts.
I think if we just record the fact that you declared that you had recently sold the property, you had no longer any interest in it, and you do not know the applicant.
No. I have met him. I don't socialise with him. It's like meeting somebody in the street and you
so
just
in
meet.
a way, yeah. I don't think really there's any need for you to withdraw from the discussion.
No, I'm not, because it's nothing to do with
of any interest in the property and the applicant, really.
No, I've no interest in the property whatsoever. But I thought to mention to the committee so that they know exactly where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Councillor Lord. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Meek.
Yes, just item 0810, which is just down the road from me. I'm not a friend of the guy, but I've talked to him quite a lot of times now as he's developing his property. So I'm quite friendly with him. I know him reasonably well, but he's not a friend, so to speak. But I've had quite a lot of interaction with him, and I wonder whether I shouldn't be voting on that, because A, it's very close to where I live, and B, I've kind of interacted with him quite a lot recently.
About the application.
Sorry?
About the application.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've kind of discussed one or two things with him, and he knows I'm on the planning thing. He hasn't tried to persuade me anyway or anything. I'm just saying that I've had quite a few conversations with him, so I do know him reasonably well, but he's not what I would call a friend. He's just by chance of living down the road from me, and I'd walk the dogs past and we have a chat.
I think as you live close by and have are sort of an acquaintance, it's probably best just to withdraw from that one. I think
I was thinking of doing that.
Yeah, not speaking or voting.
Okay, thank you.
To be on the safe side. Thanks. If that's okay with you. Then.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Okay. On to agenda item 3, public participation. To deal with any questions or brief representations from members of the public in accordance with relevant legislation and C4 Town Council policy. In accordance with Town Council policy, members of the public wishing to speak on individual planning applications may do so immediately before each application. So anybody who'd like to speak on planning applications? No, okay. Thank you. Agenda item 4, planning applications received in the week commencing Monday, 4th of January. LW/20/0857, 44 Sherwood Road, hip to gable loft conversion with rear dormer and 2 front roof lights. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? Open to the committee. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When I initially looked at it, I thought the size with the extensions and everything, it seemed to be very, very large. When you look at the plans in more detail, it actually fits the site quite well. And the neighbours, I think it's either next door but one, have their front roof lights as well. So they've also already set a precedence in the street. So I'm quite happy to support this application.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Meek, if you wish to speak.
No, just a second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. So can I have a show of hands of supporting this application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous, supported unanimously.
Thank
8 votes to nil.
LW/20/0864 37 Fitzgerald Avenue, conversion of garage/basement to studio flat. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? No, it's open to the committee. Right. Councillor Borman.
Thank you, Chair. I've been in one of the properties with a similar size of basement and garage, and it is a good size for a studio flat. But then looking at sort of the legislation with converting that into a separate property, the only issue then you have is the lack of parking, because it's all on street parking apart from their garages. And if they're converting the garage, then there is no parking at all for either property. So I'm in two minds, because it would be a good size studio flat, and studio flats are required for single people in the area, but then you do have an issue with the parking.
Councillor Meek.
I'd like to support the application. I absolutely take on board what Councillor Borman has said. I think it's a very valid point, but I would say it's outweighed by the need for providing small accommodation. A studio flat is a good small accommodation, either if someone's going to be a first-time buyer or just to rent. I think. I think as you know, cars become more prevalent, I think you'll find that people will eventually give up having them, because it just won't be worth having them. They'll do zip cars or shared cars as that rolls out more, I think. So we're trying to stop people driving around here too much as well.
Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Right, thank you, because I haven't spoken yet. So, right, thank you, Chair. I agree with both councillors in a way. I think I was quite surprised in a way why they didn't decide to put a parking space on the bit of land. There's space for a small plot there that they haven't done in the plans, but I'll just abide by. But I'd support it. I think, as you say, as Councillor Mick said, I think it get to the stage when maybe there will be less cars long term, but it's just in the meantime. And I mean, we don't know if it's going to be just used for family use, so we have no idea, do we? So it could be their younger son, daughter, or whatever. But I'd support it anyway. Thank you.
Is that a proposal, Councillor Honeyman?
Yeah, I don't mind. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And does that find a seconder? Right. I think Councillor Meek was just edged in first. I will make one comment on this. My concern with it was that it's in this flood zone 3, which is the highest level, and as a a dwelling, I do have concerns with it, and especially with the present climate. So that is my concerns. That I haven't got a problem with it being converted into any other use, but for a studio flat and living accommodation, that is my main concern. Right, so we've got a proposal on the table. Councillor Honeyman, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Chair. Yes, I know somebody who lives further back towards the Eastbourne Road, and one of the roads that go off there, and when there's, and they do get the various alerts from the Environment Agency as need be if you do get an extreme situation with a very violent storm. Yeah, I assume you're talking about sea flooding, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, can we say that in the response? We support it, but we do bear that in mind. Can we actually word it to that effect that we obviously appreciate that situation?
There's just something else to mention. I mean, yes, obviously, it's good to provide units of accommodation like this. So there is a demand for them. Just the way in which the district council might look at it, it could be influenced by a fact which hasn't been mentioned so far, in that the flat won't have a garden, won't have any private amenity space. Therefore, and the policy I circulated to you does specifically mention adequate private amenity space, and the fact that there's a block of properties in Fitzgerald Avenue, of which this is the first, which could all, if I'm not aware that there are any flats existing in the basement floor of the other properties, this would probably be the first one where a garage would be converted to provide this accommodation, and all the other properties are of a similar layout, and so it could create a precedent is one way of putting it, or it could make it difficult if all the others were to do the same thing. Well, you might think that's not a bad thing, because this sort of accommodation is required, as you say, and it's relatively close to the town centre, relatively sustainable in those terms. It's a question of whether there will be a lot of pressure on parking, but then if you know the rear area of these houses, the access is from Sherwood Road. It's a slightly unusual layout for development. There is room at the back there for additional parking, but as I say, the district council could possibly be concerned about the lack of any private amenity space. If there is any, because there wouldn't be anything to stop maybe a single mother and child, for example, going in there for sort of basic accommodation, and you know, the lack of private amenity space could be a problem because it's not that large an area either. So, as I say, if you think that those factors are outweighed by the need for this sort of accommodation, then that's fine. But it could be sort of worth mentioning in your response, because Lewis will be guided by that policy that I circulated to you.
Councillor Borman?
Thank you, Chair. Although there wouldn't be private space out the back of the properties, there is a big communal, like, green area. So that although it's not private, they do have quite a large green area to share with other residents. So I think that
yes, it's not enclosed; it's quite open, isn't it?
Yeah, so that might be able to offset that one.
Councillor Honeyman?
Yeah, I think Councillor Borman's asked the question and got the answer in a sense, because it's on the end of that particular block of buildings, so to speak, and it could be. I don't know. We don't know the detail. I don't think I didn't read it somewhere that it doesn't share the land with the main building. So sometimes you may share it, or you have. It's not that specific, I don't think, is it?
No.
Because sometimes some places you share it with the main property, don't you? Just for back garden or something, or front garden. So, which would sort of make sense then.
It doesn't provide for any amenity space in the application, so, because obviously they wouldn't share the front garden because they're
not the front, obviously. Some places they just, as you know, they do something to share the back, don't they? Depending.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough to support it, but you might want to sort of answer the points in the policy that Lewis, the case officer, will have to consider, you know, and so sort of regard it as the favourable factors outweighing the possible factors which go against the policy.
So can we make a proviso? I'm looking at that policy anyway, but can we make a proviso regarding possible shared rear garden, or just to make that a bit more explicit as part of it?
You say the open grassed area at the back can make up for the lack of specific private amenities. You say that you've considered the policy, which so that will sort of bolster your decision if you wish to support it. If you've considered it and weighed it up, then that adds weight to the decision. So if you say you've considered that and the car parking factor, but feel that any matters which may be in breach of which may be not in line with the policy are outweighed by the need for this sort of accommodation in the town, or words to that effect, and that it provides, you know, a sufficient level of accommodation as well, a standard of accommodation size-wise, and obviously it's in a pleasant residential area, you know, so that has it going for it. So I'll hand that over to you.
Okay, are you happy with that, Councillor Honeyman?
Yeah, I'm sure the planning officer can words to that effect when he writes the hopefully supporting situation.
Councillor Meek.
Chair, I just wondered if I could ask Jeff, in a situation like this where part of a house is being converted into a separate unit, does that unit count towards the fulfilment of another residence in the town? Looking towards agenda item 5, when you're going to have to fulfill this enormous government requirement, I'm just wondering, does that actually count towards it in some way, or is it considered because it's part of the same house or something it doesn't?
You're muted, Jeff.
I don't think there's a minimum size of accommodation that you know, before you have to get to a certain floor area before it contributes. I'm not 100% sure, but I think my view would be that it does contribute, because if it looks after, I mean, it's the same as a one person flat in a block of, you know, small flats, and isn't it, effectively, although it's on its own. So I think it probably would, but I'm not positive.
Okay, so we've got a proposal on the table to support this application with the various comments which have been made and seconded by Councillor Meek. And can I have a show of hands, please, on supporting this application? That's carried.
4, 5, 6 in favour, 7 in favour.
7 in favour.
Right, that's supported.
Thank you. LW/20/0852 Buckle Court Marine Parade, change of use of nursing home to 6 residential flats to include demolition of existing floor structure and addition of the second story accommodation, projecting bay and balconies, demolition of part of the single story structure and part of the roof to be changed from flat to pitch. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? And that's open to the committee. Councillor Honeyman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support this application. I know it does look quite imposing, but I think I just say if it's going to cease being a nursing home and go to residential, the Corps' position along that seafront is obviously over the years it has obviously got the weather from the sea and the prevailing winds. So I can see why they want to, while they're at it, they're going to do a substantial part redevelopment and increase the size of the property, but it's probably quite damaged internally at the moment anyway, and externally. So it's on the same pitch as the other. Well, some have been converted at the moment on that particular part of Marine Parade. I think it'll certainly make a quite a contemporary addition to that particular part. So I'd support it. Thank you.
Councillor Foreman.
Thank you, Chair. I just find it sad that it's going to look exactly the same as the one they're building next door. It'd be nice to be a little bit different, but I can't find any reason to object to it. So I'm quite happy to second that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Foreman. Any other comments?
There's an objection to mention. I don't think it can really be supported, but a lady is obviously, I think, in probably the top flat of 45 Claremont, which is a rather large white rendered block. I think is objecting that it's a further intrusion onto her sea view, because she's already got Windy Gap being redeveloped next to her, and Buybuckle Court is beyond that. It's too far away from her really to be of a concern planning wise, but she has lodged an objection, so I thought I'd mention it, but I don't really think it's a valid one. There's a big hole in the ground where Windy Gap was. Obviously that's going to be redeveloped. That has more effect on her than far more effect on her than Buybuckle Court, and she has direct views out to the sea over Windy Gap. But as I say, it's worth mentioning in passing, because if she does come back to us, we can say that her objection was considered. But she has emailed me on other matters to do with Claremont Road in the last year or so, so she may come back to me.
Thank you for that. Okay, so unless there's any other comments, Councillor Honeyman.
Yeah, so this particular lady's property, is there a gap between the two properties, so she can sort of, it doesn't completely.
There's this large white property, Claremont Road. 40.
Yeah, another one you think you mean.
Then there's an access road to Marden,
Yep.
which is a house at the back of her.
Yeah.
Still fronting Claremont Road, but if you like, between Marine Parade and Claremont Road, lies at the back of her. Then there's Windy Gap, and then there's the access road to Buybuckle Court off Claremont Road, and a property right by that that access road to Buybuckle Court. So it's quite some distance. The complaint she had before with me was about possible development at Marden, which is the property right back at the rear of that property, with an access road alongside her property. So as I say, it's possible that as she had this problem with Marden in the last year, and she's objected to Buybuckle Court, that when she finds out that the town council has supported Buybuckle Court, which is obviously it's entitled to do, she may claim that her objection wasn't properly dealt with. But as I say, that's why I thought I'd mention it, because we can say, well, we did consider your objection, but we considered it was outweighed by other factors.
And to be perfectly honest, I can't see what grounds we can object to it on.
No.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Hanlon?
Yes, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, yes, I can understand the resident. She feels as though I know blocking views is not a material consideration really anyway, but I can see where in one sense she's coming from. Yeah, but it might not be as significant as she thinks it could be. I mean, you say it's more the other property, the other substantial building's going to be more of the issue, isn't it? In a way. So
I mean, the building, the conversion is not going to be any higher than the roof line as it is now. It's just it's going to be, wider.
Yeah, and it's and it's an improvement on the current situation anyway, the actual building. Although, as Councillor Bourman says, it's a shame we're losing another nursing home, I suppose. But that's another issue, isn't it? I think we're.
It sort of fits in with the seafront. It's and it is a nice design.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Right, so unless there's any other comments, can I have a show of hands of support in this application, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Seven in favour.
Thank you.
It's supported.
LW/20/0839 Seaford Railway Station, Station Approach. Listed building consent for the installation of tongue and groove wood paneling in the waiting room. Removal of ticket office poster frames. Remove existing waiting room sofas and replace with wooden benches. WC to be remodelled with stud partition walls, new lighting and electric heating in all rooms, and repair of the wooden window frames. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? It's spoken to the committee. Councillor Borman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy to support this. I think it will enhance the station. It's bringing back into use an area that's currently unused and has been unused for a long time. And they're matching it in with what they've got at the moment. So it's not going to look any different. So fully support this application.
Thank you. Councillor Meek.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Councillor Borman. I think it's very good. It's very tasteful. It's very in keeping. My only reservation was that there's only one toilet now, but maybe that's a small consideration when the toilet will have its own wash facility within the toilet area, as opposed to between the two toilets originally. So I think that probably outweighs completely. I can't imagine there's going to be that much of a queue for the toilet. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Honeyman.
I'm not sure if they say how if it's general use toilet or you've got to get a key on, similar to the other situation, which the Steamworks seem to have. Well, when it's open, they seem to have the key. I'm not sure the actual access of it, but I don't think that's really for us to worry about, is it? As part of this.
No.
No.
Okay, I'm happy then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So can I have a show of hands in supporting this application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous, supported by 8 votes to none.
Thank you. Planning applications received in the week commencing Monday, the 11th of January. LW/20/0764, 28 to 30 Church Street. Single story rear extension to ground floor shop. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? Open to the committee. Councillor Meek.
I thought the plans were terrible. I could hardly read them, which makes me wonder. It's the same architect who did my extension here about 16, 17 years ago, and I thought he must have retired by now. But I still think he's still got the ruler and pencil out, which is the problem. I think it's so difficult to read. I really couldn't hardly make head or tail of what was going on, because even when I tried to blow it up, I couldn't see the detail at all. I don't know if everybody else had that same problem, but I found it impossible, really. So I almost feel I can't even vote on it, because I couldn't really see what was happening, except for the fact that it seems to be completely out of the back of the property, and I can't see that there's a problem unless it's something to do with the conservation area. But I'll leave that for others to judge, but I might just stand back on this one because I really couldn't understand what was going on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Meek. Any other comments? Councillor Borman.
I do have to agree with Councillor Meeks there. They were awful drawings, but trying to work them out, it looked like it took up nearly the whole of the back area and left nothing there. I don't know whether Jeff can...
I had the same trouble, but I thought, well, it's in a relatively harmless area, right, tucked around the back there, and it looked relatively small. But see, if it's been validated and registered, it's deemed good enough for consideration. but unfortunately, you know, sometimes they're let through in exasperation. You know, after the officer asks a number of questions and asks for some improvements, they don't get in any. They just say, "Oh well, you'll just let it through," because it's easier to do that than not to. And this is one of those, I think. So yes, I do sympathise. It's difficult to see it, but given the area it's in, and given, you know, that it's to benefit a business, I suppose it has that going for it. But yes, it's difficult. I mean, we could just say we just found the plans inadequate to give it proper, you know, to give it proper consideration. But I don't think there is too much prejudice about it at all, and obviously no objections, although it would have been advertised. So, you know, I'll leave it with you. But yes, I do sympathise.
I mean, I personally, you know, couldn't see much I could object to it. But I think this goes back to when we used to have the hard copies of the plans. These handwritten plans were much easier to read than what they are online. So I think we're being spoilt with the more modern, up-to-date, you know, plans we get these days. So, any other comments? Can I have a proposal or anybody? Councillor Edson? Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, yes, Chair, I'll propose this one.
Okay.
Thought.
Does that find a seconder? Councillor Argent. And can I have a show of hands for supporting this application?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in support.
And those against?
4, 1 against, 3 abstentions.
Sorry, I mean abstaining, not
Right.
against. Just because for the reasons that you said, I have no idea what I'm voting on because I couldn't make head or tail of the plans.
Fine. So 4 in support, 4 abstentions. It's supported. NEMCON.
And can you say in the when you go back to the LDC about that's the reason why we
There
got
was
the
some
abstention?
concern about the clarity of and
Yeah. Words to that effect, yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to LW/20/0860 Jubilee Gardens, erection of 2-storey side extension. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? And open to the committee. Councillor Meek?
I thought the plans were beautiful. I could read them very clearly and I see nothing wrong with the application really, so I would propose to support it myself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And does that find a seconder, Councillor Borman? Any other comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Borman, did you want to comment?
So I'm just happy to second that. It fits in very well. And
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? And so, Councillor Hanneman.
Yes, as it's on a corner plot in the corner of the cul-de-sac, even though it does look substantial, it does fit in that site fine. So I was a little bit concerned at the place at the first when I first saw the plans, but where it goes, it's absolutely fine. So thank you.
Thank you. Right, no other comments. Can I have a show of hands for supporting this application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's a unanimous 8 votes in support.
LW/20/0810 33 Sherwood Road, demolition of single garage and erection of outbuilding to form a garage space. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? Open to the committee. Councillor Borman.
yeah, thank you, Chair. When I was looking at this, it seems to be now going to be, rather than just a single garage, going to be like a double garage Plus, in July of 2020, they had plans agreed to build a rear extension. So when you look at the size of the rear extension and this building, there's literally just the patio left, and I think it's far too big an outbuilding for that size property now. So I'm actually against this application.
But the,
Councillor Honeyman?
Thank you, Chair. Probably throughout most of 2020, there's been a certain amount of work going on at the back of that, where the application is, and there's always vehicles there. There's always a bit of demolition going on, and there's always cars parked there even now. And Councillor Meek, who doesn't live too far away either, could probably verify that as well. So it's interesting to know exactly what he really wants now.
Thank you. Yeah.
He seems to be developing his property in line with the response he got from the inspector on the appeal that he lost a year or so ago. I think as I remember it, the decision was to turn his appeal down on the grounds that the garages would be too close to the pavement of the I think it's the side road, isn't it, to Sherwood Road?
Yeah.
Because the original scheme, which was refused, was for the extension in the garages. The extension was okayed on appeal. It was the garages that caused the appeal to be dismissed. He put in an application 6 months or so ago and got the extension approved, because he needed that because it was part of the appeal, although it wasn't. It was approved, but if you like, by the inspector. So what he's done now, in order to get around the problem which led to his appeal being dismissed, is to draw those garages back the 5.5 meters from the road, which the inspector required him to do. So although I sympathise with what Councillor Boorman says, it still might seem too crammed in there, you know, and too overbearing. I think it complies with what the inspector approved and advised, if you like, or it ties in with what the inspector didn't like about the original scheme. So I think it might be difficult to oppose it, as I say, in light of that decision. But I haven't got the decision letter in front of me, so I don't know whether he's followed exactly the advice of the inspector in that decision letter. But I think that's part of his case in the documents he's submitted. You know, he's just simply drawn the garages back so that there's sufficient space for safety for cars and pedestrians when cars are coming out of the garages onto Sherwood Rise, I think it is, isn't it? The access road. So it might be a bit difficult to oppose it because of this previous decision.
Councillor Honeyman?
Yeah, I've got a feeling he's actually made a start on what he's allowed to do on that extension at the back of the property. And then obviously he's using the space. Yeah, Councillor Mick thinks that's happening as well. So obviously he's using the space where the garages will be going to use all the building material and so on while he can get it all off road, isn't it? So that's what I think he's doing. So thank you.
Thank you. I think Councillor Boorman, you put a proposal to object to this application. I'm right. Does that find a seconder before we move on? No. So sorry, that falls then. So can I have the proposal for supporting this application? Anybody? Councillor Honeyman. Yeah, still muted, Councillor Honeyman.
Oh yes, no, I agree with it. I was waiting for some of the seconds. Yeah, no, I'm happy to support it. And now I think I know what's happening on the site. So
okay, thank you.
Although I'm still surprised he wants 2 garages there, but maybe that's quite. Yeah, still surprised he's gone for 2 as opposed to 1. But that's his prerogative, isn't it? So Thank you.
So does that find a seconder? Councillor Mead.
Sorry, I don't want to second, Chair. I
Okay.
just wanted to point out something, which is that when he originally did the development of that house,
I'm sorry, point of order, Chair. Councillor Meek did say he was going to sit out of this because he declared a pecuniary interest in this item.
Thank you,
So
Councillor
we shouldn't be
Bourne.
commenting.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor
All right.
Bourne. Yes.
I thought, Chair, I'd said I just wouldn't vote on it, but if I'll stand down if you like me to. Okay.
Thank you. So right, does that find a seconder, please? Councillor,
I'll second it.
thank you. And can I have a show of hands in supporting this application? You're muted.
5 in support. Hold on. No, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6.
6 in support. Sorry.
And those against?
That's supported 6-1.
Thank you. LW/20/0728 43 Seafield Close, demolition of existing single-storey rear extension and erection of a new double-storey rear extension. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? Open to the committee. Who would like to lead on this one? Councillor Borman?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did see there was an objection from someone who lived many, many miles away to do with the water, surface water, and I couldn't work out why that was, because I can't see any issues with the extension, because if you look at neighbouring properties, they've all extended the back of the buildings, so I'm happy to support this.
I don't think there's any objection to the actual extension. It's just that it might encroach over the main sewer where Southern Water has to be informed. Am I right on that, Jeff? Yeah.
Yes, it will need a separate agreement for building over the sewer, which is not an unusual situation. It's a bit like a building regulation matter, really, a sort of technicality to clear up before any building can go ahead.
Okay. So is that proposal, Councillor Borman, that you support it? Does that find a seconder? Councillor Everton? Any other comments? So can I have a show of hands in support of this application, please? 1,
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's carried unanimously, supported.
Thank you. Tree Works application. TW/20/0097/TPO 21 West Down Road. This is 7 Corsican Pines. G002T1 remove 2 large branches overhanging the road. G002T2 to T7 lift to 7 meters to reduce road overhang, which is a danger to the public footpath and pedestrians and the road and vehicles. Any members of the public like to comment on this application? And so it's open to the committee. We've actually got paperwork with this one. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Anyone who's actually walked down that road recently will appreciate them being lifted up. So I fully support this application.
Yeah, thank you. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Meek. Any other comments? No. So can I have a show of hands in supporting this application? That's unanimous. Yeah, it's unanimous, isn't it? Thank you. We move on to agenda item 5, the draft interim planning statement on housing delivery. And you're asked to consider the report contents and agree any comments or actions response giving thought to section 5 of the report.
Briefly introduce the report. I mean, it became quite a lengthy report. I intended it to be a bit briefer, but it sort of grew a bit from when I started it. It's good for Lewis to tip us off early in this process. They have a new interim planning policy head who is dealing with the job both in Lewis and Eastbourne. And I worked with him when I worked at Eastbourne a few years ago, and know him quite well. So it does help the sort of communication when we got this sort of matter on. He started off with a one-to-one briefing for each town and parish council in the district, because it was thought to be of such importance that it needed to be communicated directly to each parish and town council. And I had the discussion with him. It obviously projects quite a bleak future over the next few years, a difficult one. I mean, in a way, if members had kept up with recent planning news, it had been sort of rumbling in the background for a year or so that the counties, the regions, if you like, were being treated less favourably than before, and the housing requirements were sort of going in favour of the large cities and against the counties and regions. But there was a slight adjustment to that just before Christmas in the ministerial statement, which indicated that there would be the 20 largest cities in the country would be expected to find 35% more housing than would have been the case prior to that under the previous system announced from brownfield sites. And it was thought that that would relieve a lot of the pressure that was forecast for the county areas, but it appears that the figures were left where they are. So it is a bit of a consolation that the cities are still expected to find more housing from brownfield sites, but we still have this problem where, on the face of it, as opposed to 345 dwellings, the district will now be required shortly to find 782, which is, as I say, going to cause great difficulty. The district council obviously has forecast that sites which were thought to be worthy of protection, the sites not appropriate for development, will inevitably now be more likely to come forward for development from a year or so's time, when the allocations in the neighbourhood plan lose their the current weight that they've got. The neighbourhood plan will still carry weight, it just won't carry the same weight as it does at the current time, and there are allocations in the neighbourhood plan that still haven't been taken up. But it is a sort of a tip-off for a bit of a bleak future. So it does enable us to be prepared for a quite heavy housing requirement being imposed on Seaford in future years. So we are able to flag up in advance the particular difficulties we've got in being surrounded by the national park, being restricted by the sea to the south, and having a relative shortage of green areas. We've got a shortage of sports pitches, which is causing difficulty in finding appropriate location for the football centre, which Bellways are helping to finance from the scheme of the Section 106 agreement approved for that development. So we can flag up these matters in advance. We can let I would suggest you might want to consider letting the local MP know early on of our concerns at what's going to happen over the next few years. And but also welcome the fact that Lewes District Council have put forward these basic development management policies in the appendix to, if you like, soften the blow of the fact that when the local plan expires, when the local strategy or core strategy expires later this year, we will be subject to the rather sort of harsh, tilted policy in the national policy guidance, which says that basically if the development is sustainable, then you should approve it unless there's a very good reason not to, unless it's going to have a more adverse, a particularly adverse impact. Well, the wording, I think the wording's in the report. It sort of, it basically provides a presumption in favour of the development if there's not 5 years of housing land supply rolling forward, which is unlikely to be the case. So these policies, which there's been this quick consultation on, can soften that blow a little bit, but it is going to be more difficult to resist housing applications, particularly within the town boundaries, and for sites such as the site at Chington Lane at the bottom of the access to South Hill Barn, which was resisted back in 2016, but which is typically the sort of site that might come under threat under this new regime once it comes into place, once the core strategy has expired in 2021. So I think there's sufficient information in the report. I don't really have to add any more to it. I'll throw it open for debate, but obviously happy to answer any questions you've got on it.
I mean, one thing, you know, which is the neighbourhood plan. You say, you know, it won't have as much weight with it, and I just feel it's cost this council a lot of money to put in, you know, to get it, you know, to get it approved, and also the work of, you know, various individuals. It was a long time coming, and as I say, a lot of serious work went into it by, you know, members of the public, not, you know, not just the council, and it has cost a lot of money. And when, you know, sort of a couple of years in, it's not going to have the same weight, and that will be applied to other towns with a neighbourhood plan. And I just feel, you know, that should be emphasised as what, you know. You're muted, Jeff.
Sorry, don't want to spread too much gloom about the neighbourhood plan, because beyond the 2 years, we will still use the neighbourhood plan to fight, or we will be able to use the neighbourhood plan to fight any development which we consider to be inappropriate. But it's just that it's a warning, advance warning, that it may carry less weight than it will do for the next year or so, up to its second anniversary. Beyond that, it won't suddenly become extinct.
Right.
And I don't want to give that impression. It's just that it'll be opposed, if you like, policy-wise, by other factors out of our control. I don't know if Keith wants to talk about that, whether Keith's just observing, but that's the way I see it anyway. But,
I mean, if other members of the committee would like to hear Keith's comments, I would have to withdraw standing orders. Can I have a show of hands? Yeah. Okay, I'll withdraw standing orders just to let Keith come in with any comments on that. You're muted, Keith.
That's fine. Yes, I haven't any pearls of wisdom, really. Jeff has a lot more pearls of wisdom than I do. But my perception is that the government want to really push local authorities to agree planning applications because they're not anywhere near meeting the targets they talk about. So this absence of a 5-year supply is a threat that they are now using to try to get local authorities to have a 5-year supply. So it's disappointing, but it would seem that we can't really do anything about it. Sorry to be so wishy-washy.
Thank you for that, Keith. Right, I'll put in standing orders again. Everybody agree? Okay, thank you. And now I have Councillor Everton.
Yeah, it's just a very small point. I'd just like to know, in this economy and most of the families and people I work with, I know, I'd like to know where they're going to find 700 plus people that can afford to buy these houses. I think we're going to end up with people who are landlords increasing their rental stock. That's just how I feel.
Councillor Argent.
Well, just to answer, I think myself, if they build these houses, people in London will sell their houses for £1 million and come down and live and retire down here.
Mm.
Yeah, very true. Councillor Meek.
I absolutely understand everything everyone said, and I think it makes sense. I think we're being road rollered by the government here, and I think, as Jeff says, you know, this tilting, the pressure is going to be on us from the developers who have the government on their side. I think that's probably very true. What I was going to ask was, would it us to try and I know the neighbourhood plan has identified places where houses are going to be built, but that's not going to nearly fulfil a requirement. I mean, if it's 782 houses per year in the district, so that's for over 20 years, you said, Jeff. Isn't that right? Is that what I read? Or am I completely wrong? You said per annum, because it was 3,900 houses or something, or 6,900 houses, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that Seaford's proportion of that might be something like, what, 300 houses a year or 200 houses a year we've got to find accommodation for? I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, I'll let Jeff answer that just in a second. But what I was going to say, I know the neighbourhood plan has identified where we can build houses, but would it behove us in advance of all this to try and identify where else it might be possible to put houses, which we would prefer them to go there than, say, another greenfield site somewhere? I don't know if that's possible. Maybe Keith has exhausted all the possibilities anyway, but I'm rather thinking of, if you think of Royal Drive, which is at the top of, you know, on the it's up on the top of the hill from Princess Drive, and it's some fields, and I know there are gas mains laid through there. So I've always thought that the reason they put that road there was with the intention that at some point in the future those fields would be built on. I just wonder if we need to consider that that is a possibility, that would be a prime piece of land to build on. But the other thing I think that we can fight back with is, how do we have the infrastructure to support that many more people? Because, you know, the primary schools are full, the state schools full, the medical hub, even when it gets built, will be full because it's not going to have that much more capacity anyway. So we really don't have the infrastructure. I think the retort to government is, how do we actually accommodate all these people with services? Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Some very good points there. Would you like to come back on that, Jeff?
The 345, current 345 is per annum for the initial life of the core strategy, which was 5 years from 2016. So really, it's for the first 5 years of the new core strategy, which should really have come into effect straight, joined on to the current core strategy in 2021, but because of various matters like lack of resources, etc., it's unlikely to come into force until late 2023. But it's really for the first 5 years of that new plan or core. You can either call it local plan part 1 or the core strategy. So it's for the first 5 years of that, and these policies sort of cover the interim period, if you like, between the core strategy expiring in May and the new plan coming into effect maybe 2 years afterwards. So it's the 2-year gap that this is addressing as well. As far as infrastructure is concerned, yes, that is a concern. It also mentioned that all the houses like at Newlands and any new housing is likely to empty out further traffic onto the A259 wherever it's located in the town. And so, you know, it needs to be emphasized that very little option but to overload the A259 as a way of getting into and out of the town, both directions. So we're limited by that and the national park and the sea, obviously. So we have got those constraints which don't apply necessarily to a lot of other areas in the southeast.
Thank you. Councillor Hanlon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, those figures you're talking about, Jeff. I mean, those numbers are there for the whole of Lewes District or just Seaford? Sorry.
Whole of Lewes District, including
right, yeah. So I thought originally with neighbourhood plan when it came through, you know, Localism Act 2011, that the neighbourhood plan would be updated every sort of revised anyway every 5 years or so. But obviously, I know with the other, you know, with the white papers, you know, the 2 white papers in the autumn, which this sort of comes out of indirectly, neighbourhood plans are not really flavour them up now. So any new area probably wouldn't start one, would they? Because it's really not going to have the weight. So what I was going to say is, do the neighbourhood plans, which is basically, you could argue, is the Seaford Town Council's, so we sponsored a neighbourhood plan. It doesn't have to be a town council or parish council, but we just happen to be because we exist, don't we? Other places can be a neighbourhood plan can be dealt with by someone else sponsoring it, can't they? Or another organisation can get involved. Maybe in some of the villages a little bit, isn't it? A little bit different if I haven't got a parish council. So what I was trying to say is, actually, where am I trying to take this? I mean, our contribution, you could argue we've, as a town council, we've basically done it as long as the neighbourhood plan sort of gets looked at on a regular basis. And in a way, you could also argue it's a district council's issue, really. We're not housing authority, are we?
No, not really.
So.
You're muted, Jeff.
Yeah, there's a few points so anyway, to.
I think neighbourhood plans were a promotion, if you like, of the 2010 coalition government under the Localism Act. And I think as after 2015, the new government have taken a completely different view, have gone more centrist, if you like, than localist, if that's a word. Without venturing into politics, they've taken a different view. And while they've acknowledged that neighbourhood plans have taken a sort of foothold in the system, which is good, and they haven't proposed to do away with neighbourhood plans, I think they are seen as sort of going down in prominence. But there is still a system in place for the reviewing of neighbourhood plans. It's just that the problem is that the allocation that neighbourhood plans will have to have imposed on them is going to be so far more onerous than previously. That's the problem. But there still will be a place for neighbourhood plans. The present government, despite having a bit of a different attitude to localism and being and local government in general being more centrist in their approach. Still acknowledge the place of neighbourhood plans, so they will continue, and they, you know, we will support them because our neighbourhood plan has been successful. And neighbourhood plans have been successful around the country generally. I think there's no doubt about that.
I think this, you know, all comments we've been mentioning, I think this is why we need the local MP to be kept, you know, well informed on how, you know, the town councils are feeling, and the district, of course. Any other comments? No. So really, we want to sort of put together our comments all together. Jeff, can you help
Well,
us with one?
I think the main concerns are, you know, the difficulties that Seaford will have in achieving, you know, the higher housing requirement, considering it's, you know, the restrictions of the national park and the sea around it. So the difficulties in going beyond the development boundary of the town, the relatively high percentage of built up area within the town boundaries because of that already, problems with the infrastructure that already have been highlighted by the Newlands development, for which there wasn't a specific allocation. That was treated as a windfall, as you know. So I think we can point that out, that we've already had to put up with a very large, significant development in the middle of town at Newlands, or accept, if you like, not rather than put up with, of 184 dwellings, which wasn't part of the previous allocation because it wasn't available for housing in 2015 when the previous allocation was made, and it won't be part of the next allocation because it's already been dealt with. So we could point that out as well. You know, we've done our bit in supplying 184 dwellings at Newlands site, but that won't be taken into account for local plan purposes, but it will overload the town's fairly delicate highway infrastructure, totally dependent really on the A259, and highlight the concerns of the objectors to Newlands regarding education and health that Councillor Meek has mentioned. Welcome the attempt by Lewes District Council to soften the blow of this presumption of sustainable development by putting forward these development management policies that are in the appendix, and notify the local MP, send her the report and notify her of our concerns. That's what's going to happen in the near future regarding the allocation. So I think that covers everything. You probably, extracting your concerns from the debate, I think that does cover.
I think it does.
Points.
Yeah. Does everybody find we haven't missed anything there of what's been said? Councillor Honeyman?
Can you mention a neighbourhood plan in the sense of the problem, how much time and resources the town council spent on that? Yeah. Especially with Keith was obviously being a chair of it, and he's obviously at this meeting tonight as well. So can we mention that in there as well as one of the issues? Yeah,
sorry, Keith.
Okay, Councillor Meek.
Because can I just add, Chair? Jeff was talking about the 259 and the amount of traffic on it already, and how that's going to be impacted with Newlands and any other further developments. It's worth mentioning that once the two-way bridge is installed down at the Cuckmere, which in peak times provides a kind of a slight slowing down of the traffic and a kind of buffer, if you like, to the town. once is a free-flowing two-way road, whenever that gets built, the problem will occur when you hit the first roundabout, which is probably going to be at the Newlands roundabout. And then in peak times, you'll probably have traffic all the way down the residential road, you know, through Seaford. It's just worth bearing that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, as the A259, it's basically, you know, the only road in and out of Seaford, the Alfriston Road, but the, you know, the main access to the town is just the A259. So, okay. So, can I have a proposer and seconder on the comments we're going to put forward, please? Councillor Borman and seconded by Councillor Argent. And can I have a show of hands, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
So I'll forward that resolution to the chair, obviously, before it goes out, so that the chair will vet the draft minutes. So she'll make sure it covers everything that we are concerned about on that.
Thank you, everybody. It was a good discussion. And so we go up to agenda item 6, update report, and unless there's any comments on it, we note the report. Noted.
Yes, there's very few decisions coming out. It's just the Morrison's one really is of interest.
Okay, so everybody noted the report. Yep. Okay, thank you very much, and that concludes the meeting at 16 minutes past 8. Thank you everybody for coming, and good night.